Good evening, afternoon, magicians. We're experiencing some technical difficulties and in search of the tech guys to make the presentation work on the screen. But as we are waiting, I might as well already introduce myself so we can get started. My name is Mariana Pinzon, and I'm a transformational coach. I work as a coach, and I am a practicing chaos magician. And I'm going to talk to you this afternoon about the 8-circuit brain model, which is a model of consciousness by Timothy Leary. Robert Anton Wilson and Antero Ali are the main thinkers of this model. I would like to see a little bit, feel into the room a little bit, like who of you actually knows who Leary is? Yeah, all right. That's nice, that's nice. Who knows who Robert Anton Wilson is? All right, all right. Who knows Antero Ali? All right, a few, nice. This is a novum for me because I've been talking about this model mainly at hippie festivals and nobody knows these guys. So it's great, it's great to have an audience who is a little bit more knowledgeable about the subject already. And I'm going to dump massive amounts of information on you in the next hour. So to prepare you for that, because this is a talk about the central nervous system, I invite you to take a few deep breaths with me. Yeah, you know, that really, really deep ones where you inflate full lung. And you let it out again. One more. Yeah. Because if our nervous system is well regulated, and we can do that with this kind of deep breathing, it's easier for our system also to take in information. And I usually tend to talk very fast. So if at some point you're like, oh, just a break, just like shout into the room like deep breath, yeah? And we'll all take a deep breath. Every once in a while, I'll also do that and invite you to take a deep breath so that we can like integrate the information a little bit. Yeah? All right. So, we still have no presentation. I have like this wonderful, pretty chaos star here, yeah, which you can also see in the poster in the back. But okay, maybe before I can show you. I introduced this talk as the 8-circuit brain model as a map for balanced psychonautics or Chaosurfing. So Chaosurfing is the name of my coaching business. And I came up with that name back like at the beginning of 2020 when the pandemic started. I was like, okay, we're like up for a lot of chaos and we might just as well need to learn to surf those waves, right? And it was also a time where I was just regaining balance because after entering as a novice and a neophyte in the pact of the Illuminates of Thanateros, you know, the usual mistakes you made as a novice, you cast a spell here and there and lots of chaos, and yeah, ritual, spells. And what do you unleash? You unleash a lot of chaos in your life, right? So everything goes kind of like belly up, and this is what I felt like. It felt like wave after wave after wave of chaotic circumstances hitting me where I was like, what the fuck is just happening? And then at some point, you know, like there was this meme. I don't know if you've seen it on Facebook, going around like a guy just like sitting like on a bench. Like, and the caption said like, when the universe is asking you if you're ready for more. Yeah? It's like, fuck. I'm still standing. Come and get it, right? So around that time, when my partner was also going through drug-induced psychosis, I found this model. And this model helped me piece myself and also him back together. Because it's a nice map. It's a nice map to know, like, to find some sort of balance again. And I do love it, especially as a model of consciousness. I mean, there's many maps, right? You can do chakra system, you can do the tree of life, you can do any other map. But this map especially was made by psychonauts for psychonauts, so it also contains a little bit of theory around, or like a little bit of information about which of the different levels of consciousness or the circuits goes with which kinds of drugs. So I'm also going to be talking a little bit about that. And maybe we'll have a presentation too. Beep! That's a promising sound. I see light. It's coming. The light is coming. Perfect. Yeah, some summer deep breaths. Yay, so we have the Chaos Star. All right. I'm going to do away with this. So, one thing that I find remarkable about Antero Ali is that he brought a turn into viewing this model. Whilst Leary and also Robert Anton Wilson were pretty much obsessed with the higher levels of consciousness, Antero Ali was like, no, fuck no, it's all about the body, right? And if you want to fly higher, plant your feet firmly on the ground. So this is also one of the inspirations I got about Balanced Psychonautics. Because if you're going to go out there exploring the outer realms of consciousness, it's very, very important to take care of the base of the system, which starts with the body, of course. And all of the nervous system is inside our body, so our body is the key for Balanced Psychonautics as well. I'll be giving a little bit of background story, not too much because I see the audience is already very knowledgeable about these guys. About the project of Intelligence Increased, and we're going to talk a little bit about the map itself, the shocks and anchors, which is like the main turn Antero Ali brought into the model, and then we're going to go through the 8 circuits. So background, one's the main thinker and their main approaches. So you know this guy, right? Timothy Leary. Set and setting is one of the main tenets for psychonauts to actually, take into account. So how am I doing in my mindset when I'm entering a journey? And how is the surrounding entering a journey? And to set, like if we're going to take this model seriously, compasses also like what's the body like? What's the state of my nervous system in general when I'm entering a psychonautic expedition? And then the phrase turn on, tune in, drop out, which was like the main mantra of the 60s and the revolution, also talks about this like starting tuning into the frequencies of the higher circuits. The turn on is first like the coming alive, the feeling the desire, the participating in life, the tuning into the different states of consciousness, and then the dropping out of the matrix of the system, whatever. So just for those, who doesn't know Timothy Leary? Can I see? Okay. A few hands, all right. So this guy was a professor in Harvard in the 60s, pretty genius. And was like up to this high like vanguard research in personality development by that time. And at some point he went to Mexico and had psilocybin mushrooms. Was one of the first researchers who did so, and then returned and was like, fuck, like all I know about psychology is like it's like nothing. It's like nothing. Like one trip on mushrooms taught me more about psychology than actually like all the studies I've done. So he kind of like turned a face and started studying also LSD. Started studying, making experiments with LSD, researching LSD. And he got kicked out of Harvard because he started doing LSD experiment with his grad students. And Harvard was like, no, dude, you can't do that. And he like, you can repent. And he was doing research with Rupert Alpert, who you know may known as Baba Ramdas, that later turned to Baba Ramdas. And they were both given a chance to say like, repent, come back, you can do this. And he was like, no, I mean, this research is like gold. We need to keep researching the substances. So he went out of Harvard, got into prison because possession of marijuana. They actually like put him in prison for marijuana. He escaped prison. It's like the mind-blowing thing. He really escaped prison and was like jet-setting around the world. Got caught back in Afghanistan, put back into prison. And while he was in prison, he developed this theory. He was working on that theory, and he was also known as like theory Leary. Yeah? So his work is super, super brainy, super difficult to access. But nevertheless, and also has this bias towards a little bit of the higher circuits because he was confined, and most of this time he was also in solitary confinement. So his spirit really wanted to like escape the situation of his body and access other realms. Robert Anton Wilson. So like, who's not familiar with Robert Anton Wilson? Okay, also a few. So Robert Anton Wilson was a friend of Leary's. He's, I call him the semanticist. He's tuned into Korbinski and general semantics. And he was alive till 2007, so quite a while. And this guy had like an insane amount of encyclopedic wisdom. Like very, very brilliant character, also a Discordian. I forgot to mention this project is inspired by Discordianism, and the whole thing about order and disorder, which I'm going to get into, is like the inspiration from the Principia Discordia. So this guy is a Discordian, so it has a very good sense of humor. So reading his stuff is like it's an initiation on its own. If you read like maybe the Illuminatos trilogy, is like an acid trip in its own. So it's if you're not taking any acid, go read that book, and it's like an acid trip. So this guy, what he did with the model is like he turned it into a more workable model in his book Prometheus Rising, in the sense that for each circuit he developed a series of exercises and experiments you can go about to induce brain change. So like to rattle at your programming, to check out your programming, and bring in change into your nervous system. And this quote kind of like exemplifies also the way he looks at it. It says like, we look for the secret, the philosopher's stone, the elixir of the wise, supreme enlightenment, God, or whatever. And all the time it's carrying us about is the human nervous system. So his look at our physical existence is that of we are operators of programmable biocomputer. Yeah? And all experiences we can have, including all the mystical states, out-of-body experiences, and tuning in on the higher realms of consciousness and magic, it's brought by your central nervous system. And your central nervous system is in your body. Back at the embodiment loop. And then comes Antero Ali. And that's interesting because Antero Ali picked up Leary's model around the same time that Bob Wilson did. And Antero Ali was also participating in Bob Wilson's Discordian salons back in the time. But Antero Ali is not such an intellectualist, he's a ritualist. He's a magician. Bob Wilson was also a chaos magician, so he has that, but like his approach is still like very intellectual to the model. And Antero Ali, he considers himself a mystic, a filmmaker, a ritualist, brought in this turn into focusing more on the body with his technology he calls paratheater. So he's been experimenting with this model for about 40 years now, I think. It's been a while. He's like really kept to the work. And what he does is that He's developed sort of a protocol where you have like a body warm up, then no-form meditation, he calls it. It's like a meditation to enter a state of void. It's like a standing zazen meditation. And from that, you invite in different energies into the room, and then let your body go into the different spaces and experience something. So like through the body, he's accessing the subconscious programming of your own nervous system. So this is like a kind of a twist in an embodied ritualist psychonautic exploration, because without substances, he still tries to open different spaces through the body in exploring the subconscious programming we have in our body. So now it's the time for a deep breath. All right, so I really touched on this a little bit. So SMILE was like Leary's brainchild. Yeah, it stands for Space Migration, Intelligence Increase, and Life Elongation, which is what he was like kind of obsessed about achieving. And he thought of this model as like an evolutionary footprint as well, and saying like developing the higher circuits or the higher levels of consciousness is what will allow us as a human species to actually space migrate. So this was what he was concerned about, like how are we going to go to space migrate, and how are we increasing the intelligence of our central nervous systems. Robert Anton Wilson had more an approach like meta-programming, so how can I actually like hack my system? How can I use these altered states of consciousness, these higher circuits, to hack my system? And this is, in my experience, a lot what Chaos Magick is about, like entering different states of gnosis and then hacking your programming on the lower levels of the circuits. Antero Ali is about ritual embodiment, so like practicing through ritual, exploring the model through ritual and through the body. And my approach is this balanced psychonautics, and you can see it like in the logo. I've incorporated the Discordian, the golden apple of discord and the pentagram, which in Discordianism stands on the one side for disorder, creative disorder, and creative order. So what's intelligence increase? It's a quote here from Robert Anton Wilson. Intelligence is the capacity to receive, decode, and transmit information. Receive, decode, and transmit information. Stupidity is the blockage of this process at any point. So like if this process is somehow interrupted, that's stupidity. Bigotry, ideologies, etc., block the ability to receive information, right? So like the programming is like too structured, the order is too dense, so it won't receive new information. Robotic reality tunnels block the ability to decode. So also if our programming is too ordered or is too strict in the order, we won't be able to integrate the information we're receiving, so our system cannot do anything with the information. And censorship blocks the transmission, right? If we don't have the integration phase, we're just parroting information as well. So like, it's very easy in this kind of like, on the symbolic or language level to understand this process of absorb, integrate, transmit. I've absorbed massive amounts of this information. You're about to. Yeah? I've integrated some of it, and that's why I can like freely talk about it, and I'm transmitting to you now. So right, so it's like that process, and it mirrors, like, because we're talking about nervous system, so it mirrors the neurons. Like the neurons always receive a signal somehow from whatever part of the system, integrated in their systemic information matrix, and then transmit a signal back to another part of the brain. So the map. As you're probably aware of, the map is not the territory, right? That's also very common known in this, speaking of Bob Wilson, the map is not the territory is something he used to say and repeat again. So the question is like, if it's not the territory and it's just a map, what the fuck is it mapping? And one could say it maps the central nervous system, yeah, or the brain. But for that, we have more accurate maps already. Like neuroscience has evolved since the 60s. So like the brain maps we have right now and the maps of the central nervous system and some of the upgraded theories about the central nervous system, I would say are fairly better maps as well. What I would say this maps a little bit more is, for once, like different levels of intelligence that our nervous system is capable of functioning in. So we can see like each of the 8 circuits is one different attribute of human intelligence we can talk about. It maps different stages of consciousness, different access points we have to experiences of human consciousness. Or we could say it can function in general like a map for human experience. Deep breath. So I like to portray this map with a chaos star because it allows a feature of non-hierarchy. And this is something I find very important that also Antero Ali kind of brought into the perception of this model. Whilst like Leary and Robert Anton Wilson were a bit pejorative about the lower circuits, calling it like the robotic circuits or the animal circuits. For Antero Ali, they are all equal in their importance. And I think that representing them in this chaos sphere gives us that, right? Each of the circuits have their own function of intelligence, and each of the circuits are very important for our system in total. So we're going to look as a map, and we're going to explore balance. It is important that we value each of the circuits for their own way they function or not function in our system. And we can also see, like, we can use this as a compass as well to see, like, where we are balanced in or not, like, you know, like a DJ pult where you can, like, bring in a little bit more bass or bring in a little bit more of the heights and finding the right balance of the tunes. Well, it's like this. And if we look at this, this could be a representation of the usual brain or nervous system in the information age. We're like very, very high on circuit 3, which is the orange one, which is the mind, right? The emotional system, which is the yellow one, is underdeveloped in most, or repressed. Yeah. The physical circuit, circuit 1, the red one, most people, like, yeah, they will have good access to their body, some will be regulated, but a lot of people are running around with anxiety, so it's a dysregulated nervous system. We're pretty well programmed on the social game. On the other side of the matrix of that, the black one, it's death and out-of-body experiences, which not many people have access to. And then we have, like, and I would say, mostly for the sample of our audience here, that we're in the spectrum of the blue, the purple, and the pink one. A little bit more attuned to that. So this is like just you can see like each of the circuits can be more integrated, more developed. And it doesn't, like, one can have, for example, it's in a sense that it's not hierarchical, but more like a compass, is that you can have an experiences of out of body, yeah, or a 5-MeO DMT experience that has catapulted you out of this reality without having to develop the 5th, the 6th, and the 7th circuit before. It's probably not recommendable, but it's possible. It's not like you have to unlock all the levels to get to the highest level. So it's, for each of us, this compass or this map or where the circuits are at will look differently. And the quest is to find balance. So let's take a little bit of a closer look. I've said we have the lower circuits and we have the upper circuits. So the first 4 circuits are, so to say, like our personal circuits, or psychological and nervous system development, on the one side from our early infancy throughout our childhood up until our adolescency. And in the sense now of the Discordian paradigm, the lower 4 circuits represent order. So the way our nervous system gets wired, yeah, it forms its structures throughout our psychological development, I call the order of the system, the system has conditioned in. And then there's a game, right? You go into the higher circuits, or you go for the experience of the higher circuits. It brings in expansion, but if you cannot really absorb that and integrate that information, you'll end up in dysregulation in the lower circuits. So that's the one side of the game of balance. You can like go challenge the order of your system, and if we talk about chaos theory as well, you know, like there's a homeostasis, there's a way the system functions and finds some balance, and you bring in some disorder or you bring in some new fresh chaos. The system goes like, oh fuck, I need to find like a new way to be, maybe like that, okay. Found it, no? Found new balance. And that's like playing with magic, playing with the altered states, playing with psychedelics, will bring expansion, but also has the potential for high dysregulation in the lower circuits. And the upper 4 circuits would be then the transpersonal states of consciousness, which bring in a little bit of disorder into the system, yeah? And that's like the Discordian philosophy on that is chaos is only, the chaos is the everything, right? And on the level of perception, we have order and disorder. We have creative order and destructive order, right? Order can be conductive for us to be creative, to have like a nice apartment, a nice room, or this very nice creative order that we have in this room. But order can be destructive as well, in the sense of it can become too brittle, or it can become oppressive, or it can become non-functional. And the same is in our system as well. Maybe that we have some functioning order in the lower system, but if it's creative, it's supportive for us to expand, very well. But if it's limiting us, or it's too brittle, and it's not responsible, yeah, it does not bring a response, then we have a destructive order. And on the other side as well, we have creative disorder, which often is this access to altered state. It brings an impulse, it brings creative disorder. Or it can be destructive disorder, yeah? In the meta and the world out there, destructive disorder are wars, pandemics, natural disasters, Molotov cocktail throwing anarchists. And creative disorder can be something like, Discordianism, Operation Mindfuck, or any other kind of prank playing that kind of like rattles at the order and the structure to be. So this is like the balance we're playing with. Like how much disorder can you bring in without your system getting into a dysregulated, destructive disorder? Deep breath. Yeah, exactly. Like let's sigh it out. All right. So shocks and anchors. This is a bit that Antero Ali brought into this model. He says there's like 4 fundamental metaphysical shocks that we can encounter in our journeys with altered state or expanded states of consciousness. For circuit 5, the blue one, it's the shock of ecstasy. Right? So like ecstatic states like break you open. Right? And these are absorbed. This is absorbed by the red circuit, which is the circuit 1, which is about safety. So the more safety you have in your body, like by regulating, by taking deep breaths, the more you can also access states of ecstasy If you're not safe in your body, but you still got a massive amount of ecstasy, you probably end up dysregulated and your nervous system will like fried a little bit and you feel like an anxious monkey all the time. The sixth circuit, which is the purple one, is the shock of uncertainty. So when things get very relative, very uncertain, very chaotic. And this is something we could see, for example, at the beginning of the pandemic. Yeah, it's an influx of chaos. It's an influx of uncertainty. Nobody knew what's going to happen. Nobody knows how things are going to develop. And the anchor for that is on the emotional territorial circuit, which is like in the emotional sovereignty. So if you're emotional sovereign in yourself, very well centered, chaos or uncertainty around you might not matter that much. But if you're not very centered, what kind of responses do we have? Like, we have like two responses like, oh, fuck, everything's out of control. Please, please, daddy, please, authorities, make that is safe again. Yeah, please, bring back control. Yeah, you need to bring back control. And on the other side of the emotional program is like, fuck you, I won't do what you tell me. No, fuck you, I won't do what you tell me. Fuck regulations, fuck that, fuck authority. So that's like the emotional responses that we can see when the uncertainty rises, right? Then we have unity, like the shock. It's a shock for the mind, especially, because the mind likes to work in the dual realms of consciousness, duality. This is not that, putting labels and things. You enter unity and the mind goes like, what? Where am I now? Do I belong to this? Am I part of this or not? So that can be a shock for the mind to experience unity. And the fourth shock is impermanence, so death. Everything changes. And that's a challenge for our identities, mostly, or egoic identities. So the anchor in that is also community. When we face death and impermanence, if we're very well anchored in community, we can deal with these processes much better than if we're not anchored in community. So, yeah, circuit 1, circuit 2, circuit 1 is the red one, circuit 2, circuit 3, circuit 4. You can see that. Take a deep breath, take it in. All right. So circuit 1. I also advertised that I'll be correlating the circuits to the 8 colors of magic, right? So circuit 1 is like red magic. And I've been talking to another magician, and he has like a totally different subscription to the colors of magic to this model. So this is just my interpretation. Leary called us the vegetative invertebrate oral biosurvival circuit. With Antero Ali, it sounds more like, okay, the physiobiological intelligence or the will to survive. I call it the bio-unit maintenance. And that I have my own names for the circuits comes also from this course of Antero Ali, who says, like, if you really are going to integrate this, fucking find your own labels for it, you know? Like, talk about it, how you experience it. So that, for me, it's like the bio-unit maintenance. And it is, therefore, also in red magic, because I feel red magic is like, yeah, it's fight magic. But it's also, for me, about vitality. Yeah, so it's about the body, about how vital is the body and how well can the body defend. It's the defense magic and war magic, but it's also about vitality, like being very vital in your body, being tapped into life. So circuit 1, which evolutionarily developed in the reptilian brain and is a part of the amygdala and the vagus nerve. The basic program that runs in circuit 1 is fight, flight, freeze. Right? So this is a part of our nervous system that's constantly in alert, scanning the room, scanning the environment for any threats. And as soon as it perceives threats, it goes into alert. And depending on the programming, it would rather tend to fight, or it would rather tend to flight, or freeze, which is also one of the known trauma responses. It's imprinted. We have like a threefold process. We have a process of imprinting, then we have conditioning, and then we have learning. Yeah, our nervous system gets imprinted in a phase, then it gets conditioned throughout our life, and it can learn. So the imprint of this part of the nervous system happens in early infancy, also already in pregnancy. So for example, if the mother would be experiencing a lot of stress, a lot of distress while she's pregnant, this will imprint the infant's nervous system as well, and they will probably come into the world as a nervous monkey. And will probably carry this imprint throughout their whole life, as being a very anxious person, their nervous system always been in the state of like, the world is not okay. The world is a threat. I don't feel safe in the world no matter what I do. And this is like super, super hardware wiring and very difficult to re-imprint. And it's like the longest journey, I think, one can take in personal development to re-imprint the circuit. The basic needs are food, shelter, safety, deeply feeling the body. So the body really wants to be felt deeply. If we don't exercise, if we don't use our body to be felt, it tends to show itself in form of pain or any other ailments like, hey, here, I'm still here. Are you aware of me? You remember me? I have needs, you know? So we can notice if we don't have, if the circuit's not very well integrated, if we have addictions to security, we're going on control trips, we experience a lot of anxiety, or we are relying on parental figures for our survival. This could be also authorities. So for example, I cannot take care of myself, so I need social support, or I go into an institution or somewhere else because I cannot take care of my most acute needs of food, shelter, and safety. And then there's the drugs. So Leary said that the drugs that work on this part of the system is opium, for example, like opiates, because they make you feel like if you were back in the mother's womb. So it feels like, oh, the world is safe again. You know, it's like cozy and all like fluffy. And nicotine and serotonin, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, yeah, that one. So the normal antidepressants are also are also affecting the system. So if you take a look at that and you do this information and you look at the opioid epidemic we have in most of the United States, nicotine addiction, and how many people are on fucking antidepressants, you can see that we've been doing a very, very bad job in circuit 1 imprinting, yeah, and then circuit 1 maintenance. And then there's like these 3 phases of intelligence increase, right? Absorb, integrate, transmit. So for circuit 1, it would be like really tuning into the body signals. And this blew my mind the other day when I was talking to an autistic person that said like for them, it was very difficult to actually interpret their body signals. Like they would feel like some body distress and they would have to go to like, I need to like, what might I need? Do I need food? Do I need rest? Do I need to pee? Is there any danger? No, there's no danger. Okay, danger crossed out. Then like, okay, check my bladder. Bladder's okay. Okay, what else could it be? So like, it's like really being able to interpret the body signals or the distress signals of the body. The integration phase would be like to be able to regulate back into safety, like when the body the nervous system gets agitated, and it's like alert, alert, alert. So what we've been doing, like the deep breathing, for example, or what animals do very, very easily, and we don't because it's socially not acceptable, like shake it off, right? When an animal is being hunted and he escapes, and then the threat is over, they're just like, back to play. And we don't do that because like that would look weird, right? But you can implement that. Like, you know, if your body gets activated, just breathe, shake it off, things get better. Huh? Yes, exactly. And there's a lot of people doing great work in Berlin around that as well. So the transmission phase would be the co-regulation phase. So if I have a nervous system that can regulate into safety, I can also maybe provide safety to others, right? Like by breathing with them, helping them ground again, and that would be like the transmission phase. So deep breath. Circuit 2. It's emotional territory. Leary called it the emotional locomotion, or and Robert Anton Wilson, the emotional territory circuit. Antero Ali spoke about emotional territorial intelligence, or the will to power. And I call it the emotional sovereignty. And it's Jello magic for me, because this is about the self-worth, the ego, the radiance, the self-expression as well. So like Jello magic for me is also this magic around changing ego, changes in the ego, or increasing ego radiance, decreasing ego radiance. So like, how much of my self-expression am I putting out there? And it's associated with the limbic system, or the mammalian brain, the basic programming that gets imprinted when we're toddlers. So it's that moment when we start walking around the territory, like, well, not walking yet, but like crawling around the territory, discovering new things, putting everything in our mouth, you know, creating our first boundaries and seeing like, okay, this is mom and this is me, so like developing the sense of me. That's where we imprint that part of the nervous system, and the basic imprints is either dominance of submission or aggression cooperation. Dominance, submission, aggression, cooperation. So depending on how mom and dad were at this phase, we get a different imprint if we're like more tend to be on the dominant side of life or more on the submissive cooperative side of life. The need that this part of the system has is to develop ego strength. And now I like here how Antero Ali puts it. It's not about like big ego. It's not about making a big ego, but ego strength is about having a flexible ego structure that's able to flow with the emotional expression of the system. So that's ego strength. So actually being the ego structure we develop, being able to allow the most authentic expression of herself. That's ego strength in this paradigm. It's about territorial ownership as well. So like, you know, I'm king in my castle. And this could be, I'm king in my little room in my shared flat. It could be I'm the king of my flat. And then there's other apes on this planet that are more like, I need to control large amounts of territory. Also territory that other people control, and I'm going to invade that territory so I can control it. It's about boundaries. It's about the boundaries of our own territory. So like, what's my personal territory? What's my space? Are you coming too close into my space? It's about also the whole game of self-importance, status, security, and control. How do we notice when we're out of whack in the emotional territorial system? When we're like burned out or depressed, or we are running control trips, or we're apathetic, or we're running power plays, or we're caught in drama loops. We're fawning, which is another form of trauma response, people pleasing. When we're in emotional overdrive or having emotional roller coasters, or if we're constantly seeking approval from the external world, then we're not being emotionally sovereign. Funny enough, the drug that Leary ascribed to this part of the system is alcohol. So you go out there, get yourself wasted drunk, and you'll figure out something about your monkey programming. So there's like the people that are like, and there's the people like, oh, you know, I'm funny, please like me because I'm so funny and so likable. And then others that are more like just drunk. So the intelligence increase transition here is that absorbing would be like actually allowing to feel the feels, right? Let them flow through. And also noticing that feelings are signals from our nervous system, and the signals pertain to our emotional territory. So anytime we experience an emotion, it's a signal that has to do something with our sense of self. Is our sense of self being aggrandized? Is our sense of self being attacked? Do we feel angry about this? Is our boundaries being crossed? Is our territory being crossed? Do we need to defend it? Do we feel anger? And anger is a signal to defend oneself. Integration would mean managing our emotional supply, like really knowing like what is giving me emotional supply, what is diminishing my emotional supply, and finding that like balance of regulating our emotional responses, and that arriving at the sense of self-sovereignty. And the transmission is then, on the one side, the authentic self-expression, or holding space for emotional alchemy for others. And this thing of the authentic self-expression, like emotional circuit 2, I think is like the part of where most of like the trauma things are happening. You know, all the trauma talk is happening. We're talking mostly about circuit 2, and about this when we are imprinted and conditioned, emotional condition in our early youth. It's about our authentic self-expression being limited in some form or repressed in some form. And it takes us a whole fucking journey to deprogram that conditioning. Deep breath. So circuit 3, we have Leary saying it's the laryngeal symbolic circuit. Robert Anton Wilson saying it's the semantic time binding. And that's interesting, especially the time binding aspect of this, because it's the mind that creates our sense of time. The mind with its narratives, and the mind with its imagination and its memories of the past. Antero Ali calls it symbolic conceptual intelligence, or the will to reason. I call it the sense and map making circuit, because it's how we make sense of the world and the maps we play. And this is also just another map to make sense of the territory of our consciousness or our nervous system. So this circuit is associated with the neocortex. The basic program imprint would be bright or dump. So it gets imprinted in primary school, and depending how well we are nurtured, do we develop a bright intellect or a clumsy intellect. The needs this part of the system has is sanity, making sense of the world, solving problems, but also this whole pattern analysis, anticipation, pattern recognition, semantics. So it's like really about understanding the world and navigating the world from this what the fuck is going on and how can I make sense of it, and what kinds of maps or what kind of concepts or what kind of theories can I use to make sense of the world. When we're not in balance in the circuit, we can notice by when like our mind goes in like this monkey mind spins of rumination, or we drift into insanity, or we get stuck in cognitive biases, or we are caught in dogmas and dogmatism, or when we're in this sense of like, Antero Ali calls it like bitch of logic, when like logic determines everything you do, and logic makes you your bitch. Or when circuit 3 is a tyrant over your emotions, and circuit 3 won't let you experience your emotion, or needs to interpret every emotion and make sense of every emotion, not letting you feel the emotion, but like, I need to immediately make sense of what this emotion is telling me. Or when we fall into like delusions of grandeur or other kinds of like, delusions. And the drugs that work on this part of the circuits are the more activating drugs like speed, cocaine, caffeine, amphetamine, Ritalin, so all those kind of like drugs that activate our circuit 3 and get us into like more fast-paced thinking. And I already mentioned the absorb, integrate, transmit phase here. So like reading, listening to data, comparing data in itself is an absorption process. The integration process is like thinking for yourself. Like, okay, what is this information all about, and how can I now map it and categorize it with the information I already have? So like, how can I integrate it in the amount or structures of knowledge that my brain already has? And it's about then creating meaning for that information. So like we are the meaning makers, that the circuitry is the meaning maker of our experience. And transmission is then teaching and also deconstructing bullshit or belief systems. Circuit 4 is the social sexual domestication circuit by Leary, or social sexual by Robert Anton Wilson. And Tero Ali calls it social moral intelligence, or the will to socialize. And I call it the social navigation circuit. For me, one of the key elements of the fourth circuit is the compass of our values. So if we're like certain of our values, we can identify our own ethics. That is the compass we actually need for social navigation. So it's associated with the prefrontal cortex. The basic programming would be a moral or immoral person. And now here, obviously, most of magicians would consider themselves an amoral. So we usually don't follow the moral imprints of our given society. But if you're run by your own ethics, you're also not immoral, but you're amoral and run by your own ethics. So the imprint here happens in high school when our sexual hormones kick in and our nervous system kind of like restructures itself to get into the mating game and into forming some adult persona. And starting to, so it's all about like belonging and the courtship game and finding your friends and experiencing love and finding connection and finding a tribe and a community and ask yourself like, who I belong to? Am I really a goth, or am I more a punk, or maybe it's more maybe it's more a hippie. I don't know. Maybe I'm an emo. So yeah, you know, this teenage phase where you just don't know who you are and who our tribe is. Yeah, that's circuit 4. So it's like how we build our social identities, but it also pertains all the spectrum of ethics, culture, and religion. So religion is a device to imprint and condition circuit 4. So and that's this thing that's a little bit weird in our society nowadays, right? So most tribal societies and older civilization, they used to have an initiatory process in our teens, making sense of what is happening in our brain in this phase. So when our brain, the hormones start kicking in, this adolescence phase, and the brain's like, I don't really know who I am. You know, there's initiatory rituals that kick in and then imprint the individual with a program or a condition that will work for their society. And we don't have that in our society. So this whole process of adulting, we're pretty left alone with figuring out adulting in some way and figuring out how to do this. And the cultural programs or religious programs that have run the Western world are also, well, yeah. I'll leave it at that. Probably, yeah. So we know when we're not in balance here, when we fall into manipulation, possessiveness, when we run on guilt trips. So yeah, guilt and shame are usually very used tools in social conditioning to make the individual adapt to the cultural program. And if you're not doing what we need you to do, we shame you or we guilt trip you into behaving and conforming. And it's part of the survival circuitry. Like circuits 1 to 4 are all like survival programs. And this is part of our survival because for our predecessors, our ancestors, being kicked out of the tribe would mean probably certain death. If you're not part of the tribe, you cannot fend mostly for yourself. You probably will die. So our nervous system knows that, right? So when we don't act in conformity with the social game structures we're navigating in, we'll usually experience some form of shaming or some form of guilt tripping to make us conform, and thus activating also our nervous system in a survival pattern because we fear that if we cast out, we might not survive. Of course, in the states we're navigating right now, this is not as much, but much of our experience in like this whole game of finding belonging and finding a tribe still activates circuit 4 survival programmings. So the absorption phase is that socialization and social codes. You get inculturated into a culture, you get taught by your parents how to behave politely in society, how to navigate society. So it's like, yeah, the indoctrination phase, you could say, and how to make you a conform citizen of our society. The integration phase then happens when we actually start like building our own ethical compass and start acting at our own code, like identify our own code of functioning and stick to it in integrity. And it also is a feature of honest relating, of like dropping the identity masks, dropping the games and the social personas, and meeting the people we are facing in a very honest and direct and present way. And the transmission phase would then be for once, building tribes, like, okay, I got my, this is my ethical compass, like, who's with me, yeah? Who also resonates with this ethical compass, and can we form a tribe? And it's also about having a more flexible persona, so about not being identified with the 1,000 different identities we have, and how like a more loose and fluid identity, play with the identity here and there, bring up the persona we need when we need it, and drop the mask on the other personas when we don't need it. Deep breath. Okay, yeah. So I'm gonna hurry a little bit up through the upper circuits because we're running out of time. So circuit 5 is a neurosomatic circuit. Neurosomatic technicians, that's what like Robert Anton Wilson calls shamans. Shamans are the neurosomatic technicians because they can, they can manage circuit 5 in a way that you can feel good, yeah, and get back to health. Antarali calls it somatic intelligence of body wisdom, and it's characterized by the absence of suffering. So it's like the feel-good circuit. Yeah? I call it the somatic hedonist. And the shock I already mentioned is ecstasy. So the program it runs is, it's somatic experiencing. It's like being in the here and now. It's being very, very present. So we're out of the linear thinking of our mind, and we drop from our mind to our senses. Lose your mind and come to your senses is the claim of Circuit 5, right? You can access this through tantra or pleasure or all kind of like kinetic language, so also like dance and moving and this kind of like self-expression. Catalysts for Circuit 5 activations are moments of rapture and bliss, communion with nation, like being very present or in the flow, trusting the flow, moments of wonder and play and awe. But it also is the charisma we bring in, because when we're very present and we're very like attuned to what is in this moment, we also start developing more charisma and become more attractive to other people. And you know, you probably experience that as well. Like, you know, you're in the middle of something, of some mind games, and then suddenly a majestic creature flies through, and everybody's like, wow. And there you have it, like a moment of timelessness, of full presence. You can notice if you're in disbalance here, or you're not very well connected because you're low in energy, or you have security fixations, or eating disorder, addictions, or you have sensory overload. This is also what I found in a lot of neurodiverse people that are very sensitive in Circuit 5. They have like a higher sensory experience sensitivity, so they experience sometimes also sensory overload. And this means that this Circuit 5 is receiving much more information that it can integrate and transmit and process. And the drugs that activate the circuit is cannabis, ecstasy, MDMA, or also endorphins. The absorption phase is then like dropping into this like self and sensory immersion. And I would say it's like a lot of what happens in the tantric and hedonistic play party scene. And we become sometimes in this phase when we're just like really dropping into our self and sensory immersion, we become a little bit narcissistic because it becomes all about our experience and our sensory experience and pleasure and experiencing pleasure. So moving up to the integration phase is this state of being in a very embodied presence, actually. Like not only seeking pleasure, but being just fucking present. And non-resistance, like this more Taoist approach of life, of not resisting the things as are and being in the flow, getting out of your own way, letting things happen and just being okay with whatever is and is presenting, with just like taking in the full immersion of experience. And the transmission phase would be then space holding. So when we're able to create a space for others to drop into this kind of presence. And also charismatic agency, because once we've integrated Circuit 5, we're going to be very charismatic people that go onto the world and start activating other people. And this is like, yeah, most gurus would be Circuit 5 adepts in some form, transmitting ecstasy and presence and charisma to others. Circuit 6 is then the neuroelectric circuit or the meta-programming circuit. Ali calls it the intuitive psychic intelligence, or which is characterized by the absence of self-investment or dogma. I call it the neurohacking magician, and this is the circuit where we usually hang out as magicians, trying to figure out our reality tunnels, create our different realities, and change our inner wiring, change our working in a system. And this is where most of, I would say, like Sigil Magick and Chaos Magick ritual tries to tap into the states of gnosis to change the programming. So we're tapping into operating system level, operator level, that we can like start meta-programming or reprogramming the previous circuits. It's also the moment of awareness of like, okay, I'm aware that all these programs are running in my system, so now I can like take a look and make changes to it. The shock is uncertainty, novelty, freedom, relativity. This is about crafting synchronicities, if we would say so, like the magician in chaos engineering, crafting synchronicity, switching reality tunnels. Once you notice that the way you experience reality is due to the programming you have in the different circuits of your 1 to 5, 1 to 4, which is like the matrix of filters of perception, right? The structure you have, the order you have, then neurohacking or magic becomes the act of like changing that filters of perception, changing the programming so that you're able to open up your awareness for more influx of information, and thus you're also able to change the channel, as Robert Anton Wilson said. So if you know how your channel is programmed, then you can start making changes to your channel and experience a different reality. We can access this through initiations. This like catalysts would be like what you call awakening experiences, or Kundalini awakenings, awakening of the energetic body when we start developing psychic abilities, or sensitivity to light and light patterns, and this is when we realize also we're a multidimensional self. The drugs that get activated is then on lower doses already mescaline, psilocybin, LSD. So all the drugs that tap into the serotonin receptors. And serotonin is also the transmitter that is important for this light sensitivity. So that's where we can like tap into the signals of light. So tap into like seeing auras or perceiving the light, or tap into like the energetic field in the room and access the information that is in this energetic field. And when we're in disbalance or disconnected is when we fall back into victim stories. Many or most of the mental health problems, they would say, that comes from a disbalance between circuit 2 and circuit 6. So if we're like tapping into like these different channels and different realities and like a lot of different signals, and we're not very self-sovereign, then we'll start experiencing paranoia, or schizophrenia, or a lot of projections, or spiritual grandiosity, right? You know, it's like, oh, I'm the master of the universe and the biggest magician ever seen. But also it's about loss of imagination or loss of humor. So we don't have access to circuit 6. We're like, yeah, the unhumorous twats. So the absorb phase of it would be intuition, precognition, all the channeling we can experience is like tapping into the sources of information that are in this electromagnetic field. All the clair sensing would be all of that. And now there's an important thing that comes on with the connections, right? So you're tapping into that field, that energy and channeling, but the transmission you'll bring in, if you don't have very clarity on your emotional programming or your mental programming, will still be colored by your emotional or mental programming. Yeah, so it's not a clear channel. And once integrated, then we're able to reality select, we're able to meta-program. And the transmission phase would be telepathy, or also remote viewing, or like sending signals to other brains without using our circuit 3. And also healing, but because it's about the energetic body. So in the moment we have like completely integrated circuit 6, we also unlock our healing capacities, because we can then also clear the information in other systems on the energetic level. Deep breath. Circuit 7, the neurogenetic, morphogenetic, mythopoetic genetic intelligence. It's the absence of the dualistic mind. And it taps also a lot into, epigenetic, into DNA. For Leary, this was a lot about the ability to tap into the gene code, or into the genetic code, into the DNA of our own nervous system and make changes there. It was also the ability to access, say like, I call it DOS, the cosmic network connection. It's like this access to God, Adman, Chaos, Akasha Chronics, where the fuck the downloads come from. So as I mentioned also before, the shock is unity, non-duality, or interconnectedness. And I mean, it depends how much of a shock this is, depends on the circuit 3 programming, right? People with a very flexible mind will come back from an experience of being in unity or in non-duality or being connected with everything else, more with a sense of like, nice, that's like it is. And people with like a very strong mind programming will suffer, because it's difficult for the mind to be in unity. So this is about evolutionary agency, like taking really charge of your evolutionary development, and then also surfing synchronicities. Yeah? So it's like, it's being like tapped into the waves and the synchronous waves. It's not about manufacturing synchronicity like the magician. You know, the magician, it's like circuit 2 comes with the will, and the magician's like, I have this will, and I will use my energy and my imagination to create the synchronicities I want. Well, the circuit 7 adept, it's more the mystic. It's more like they're really being tapped into the current of things and flowing with the synchronicities. So access can be like through the DNA, invocation, alchemy, astrology. Those are like usual languages to tap into the space. Invocation to tap into different archetypes. So catalysts can be like experiences with muses or archetypes. You know, this kind of like experience that many artists have of like, I've got this moment of trance, and like something comes in and I start painting and doing and working and making, and at the end of the process I'm like, wow, okay, it has worked through me, right? So it's like circuit 7 inspiration, like tapping into the inspiration, into the muses, but it can also mean like if we have like a good connection to a circuit 3, it means like an idea can spring in and we be inspired and our circuit 3 goes like, I need to problem solve this, you know, like Edison, you know, light bulb. It didn't exist before. He got the idea out of nowhere, apparently, and then was obsessed in making it happen and finding a solution. So circuit 7 taps into the idea, and circuit 3 is the one that problem solves to make it into reality. And that's why, like, also when we're in this balance, we tend to like overthinking, paranoia, claustrophobia, or a hyper-realist outlook on life, materialist outlook. We suffer imagination death or alienation as well. And it really like depends on the circuit 7 to circuit 3 connection. Like if somebody comes into this like mystical experience, right, and comes back and can create a good story that makes sense to others, like, oh, I experienced this and I got this message and God said blah, 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 and others go like, wow, yeah, that really makes sense. I'm gonna follow the dude, he's like tapped into something, you know? But if they come back and they make no sense, what does our society do with that, usually? We lock the people up, right? And like, in some like more shamanic tribes, when somebody would like tap into circuit 7 consciousness and come back and not make sense, people would like go, whoa, this dude got tapped into something, he's not making sense, we better bring him to the shaman because he needs proper training so he can like actually make sense of what he's experiencing. And we're just like, no, this dude does not make sense, like put in on some drugs, like on some antipsychotic drugs because he's not making sense. Yeah. And this we access, the circuit we can access through heroic doses of LSD, psilocybin, and DMT. The absorption phase would be like, yeah, the downloads or the invocation. So the moment you like make the connection to the cosmic network, you get the information. The integration phase is like find the language, find the mythopoetic language, find the way to symbolically express it through your art, through your poetry, through your science, so that you can actually like, yeah, integrate that that information, embracing the mystery, and then like, yeah, transmit it through some science, art, or philosophy. And circuit 8, last one. It's ominous names of like neuroatomic or non-local quantum non-local intelligence. Absence of ego identification. I mean, it taps into the Chaos Magick theory and like the whole quantum physics and all of that. But at the end of the day, I think it's about radical transformation. So it's about really embracing impermanence and allowing the changing and changing and changing of the seasons to happen. And it's characterized by like absence of either ego identification. So the shock, death, impermanence, experiences of void. Yeah. The program we can run there is like dreaming reality, like dreaming ourselves into reality and transcending. There's like this thirst for transcendence of this reality. It's, factor X, the unknown, the big fucking mystery of whatever were quantum states, I don't know. The catalysts are near-death experiences, for example. Yeah. Or Antero Ali brought in a bit that I find very cheerful, like making a fucking total fool of yourself. Because in the moment that you make a total and absolute fucking fool of yourself, and you survive that, and you notice that you survive that, so boop, ego identity dropped, right? Out-of-body experiences, lucid dreaming, illumination, quantum consciousness, spiritual emergency, whatever. This balance is when we, for example, we like experience this death wish, like we're like so tapped in by the mystery of dying and releasing the identity that we kind of develop this thirst of death. Or alienation, like we're taking high dose of DMT and come back like, I feel like an alien on this fucking world. Do I even belong on this planet? I don't know. Humans are funny creatures. Or our identity completely collapses. On the other side, if we don't have connection to our circuit 8, we're experiencing being like social butterflies, over-socializing all the time, gossip-mongering, being like very immersed in the social game, being caught in herd mentality, or like over-moralizing to others because we're like too circuit 4 without being tapped into circuit 8. So absorb, yes, any experience of void, of immense paradox, of factor X, the unknown. High uncertainty zones, so like when we're like thrown into chaos in itself, like everything is like very, very chaotic. And that's this thing, you know, when we're experiencing states of chaos, our nervous system goes like, fuck, I need to open up completely so I can take as much information as possible so I can ensure survival. And integration would be then lucid dreaming, actual projection, the whole crossing of the abyss thing. Shape-shifting as well, in the sense of that you're so detached of your ego identity that you can take any shape you want. And the transmission or the mastery phase would be like this like very zen thing, pursuit of being nobody, being no one, be just like pure potential, be just pure magic, without any identities, living without an identity. So here I have it again, the connection, right? So the bit of Chaosurfing lies in this circuit 2, sovereignty and uncertainty. To surf chaos, or to surf the big waves of uncertainty that hit us in our life, the most important thing is reclaiming emotional sovereignty. So the more sovereign we are in our emotional territorial circuit, in our sense of self and our self-expression, the more chaos and uncertainty we can actually surf and navigate with in the world. And the more flexible our mind is, the more we can open up to the mystery and to the unknown. And the more we're grounded in community and have some attachment or some anchor in our identity and our purpose in community, we can deal more with impermanence, and we can deal more with death and the passing and the losses. And the safer we are in our bodies, the more we can experience ecstasy. Last one, chaos as an evolutionary agent. I want to read you this quote. So implementing inside shocks can encourage more ego flexibility to help us navigate the influx of greater forces catalyzed by outside shocks. So this is like what Robert Anton Wilson does on Antero Ali in his book, The Eight-Circuit Brain. All the kind of like exercises and challenges they propose, they're like bringing in little shocks to our system. And the more we can like integrate those little shocks, the more flexibility we start gaining in our circuits. Any state that triggers experiences of chaos tends to get our full attention. Chaos acts thus as an evolutionary trigger that dilates perception to the naturally incomprehensible complexity, the chaos of the brain itself. So like states of chaos, as I was saying, like put the brain in this like, okay, all channels open, I have to take it all in. And in this moment where you take it all in, you have then like a chance to reconfigure your brain again. So chaos accelerates perception of uncertainty by temporarily breaking down mental fixations and certitudes. This is neuroplasticity at its best, right? This is a psychedelic experience. It breaks down mental fixations and certitudes, thus allowing us to take in more information. So all these states are fluid opportunities for shifting into higher levels of functioning, and if that is what we want. It's not the shock that is important, but it's how we respond to the shock that dictates what happens next. And that is, I think, one of the aims of the great work and of the pursuit of magic, is to like tapping into that chaos, plunging yourself into that chaos, and creating the responsibility in your system to maintain the balance without going nuts. Yeah. Yeah. There is this invitation, if you want to explore more about the Eight-Circuit Brain, to join me for 9 weeks of Chaos Monastics. Whoever feels the impulse of that can like approach me because they're running out of time, but it's basically following Peter Carroll's approach to Chaos Monastics. We decide for 9 weeks that we're going to commit to a rigorous observance of ritual and practice, exploring the 8 circuits of the brain, so each week one circuit. And the program is full of rituals and experiments and others, meditations, reflection prompts sourced from Antero Ali, Robert Anton Wilson, Peter Carroll, Alan Chapman, and some of my own as well. So that's it for tonight. Thank you for listening, folks.